Can you hear me all okay and see everything okay?
Yeah.
Yep, that's the one answered. Yeah, so as Mark said, I'm going to talk today a bit about AIOps and incident management, but I'm going to do a few other things as well. So I'll do a few definitions to start with, things like AIOps and chatups, which links quite closely with it, about how it has affected incident management in kind of recent years, but also how, when you're looking at it, you can think about how you can improve your sort of maturity in this area as you start the journey. I'll look at some of the kind of typical use cases as well that we see for this, and I'll also introduce you to, we've developed this year a reference architecture for AIOps, so I'll just talk through a bit about that. And then I'll just close out, actually Mark, I'll close out, we do, in a number of areas, we do a predictions paper at the beginning of each year. One of the ones was on artificial intelligence, so I'll just mention a couple of things in there because it actually chimes quite nicely with some of the things Barclay was saying earlier. So that's what I'll go through. So starting off, let's have a think about incident management. So if I were to sort of play devil's advocate, you could sort of argue that incident management itself hasn't really changed a huge amount over the years. You kind of, you know, we have a problem, we have an issue, we log it, so we've got a central record for it. We then typically go through one or more sort of handovers to find the right person to kind of fix it, and then we put our trust in them to resolve it and get things back and running, or a team get things back and running. And the introduction of artificial intelligence kind of starts to change things. So if you think of that process, it's a very resource intensive way of resolving issues. You know, you physically need people to do things. At the same time, the world we're working in has become more challenging because, you know, customers are much more exacting. We have, like, you know, huge distributed infrastructure now rather than, you know, everything on premises. We have lots of different kind of microservices playing on that infrastructure, and we have like a growing technology footprint. So things have to change because you can't, as that growth in the complexity increases, we can't just keep doing the same things and have people work. So by changing that, what we're trying to look to do really is to reduce those resolution times and get happy customers. And so to do that, and to deal with all that complexity, and also, you know, analyze information a lot faster and collaborate efficiently across teams, a lot of people are moving to things like AIOps, and also combine it with something we call chatups, which is chat platform-based kind of operations work. As teams become more and more distributed, this is becoming a more and more powerful tool to work with AIOps in order to help people kind of resolve incidents. So I'll start off a couple of little definitions of AIOps and chatups. So AIOps is essentially, very basically, about applying intelligence to things like IT monitoring. So the aim of using it is to kind of significantly reduce you know, mean time to get not necessarily specific mean time resolution, but certainly mean time to know what the problem is. These solutions, the AIOps solutions, sift through massive amount of data in real time that a human being couldn't do, to try and find pain points and to, you know, improve the way we do it rather than trying to sift through data in maybe siloed toolkits that we had before. It brings together things like, you know, monitoring platform data, which traditionally have been quite fragmented and siloed, and, you know, collect it together, aggregate it, contextualize it, which is one of the real intelligent bits, and then apply some analytics to manage all of that data. And also, we're looking at things like, you know, prescriptive guidance to, you know, identify and remediate and optimize that process so that we can use that intelligence to improve things as we go. Now, chatups is a little bit different. So that's really very much an organizational strategy. So it shifts the center of work to sort of teams based on things like Microsoft, you know, Office Teams or Slack, and also integrating some things Bartley talked about, you know, things like chatbots and other integrations to connect this kind of world up. So its fundamental principle is to try and accelerate that collaboration so that we can resolve things more quickly. So the chatups element really makes this cross-organizational or cross collaboration effort, manageable because you would track work, find your sources of data, and really, again, have some more of that in context information. And this idea of context is very important in this world, both with AIOps and chatups. Okay, so that's a little bit of understanding of what the two are. If we ever think now, okay, so how does that actually improve incident management? What's the proof in the pudding? So both of them are beneficial to teams, but each tool has some kind of blind spots when you deploy them on their own. What we've seen in the market, what we've seen certainly with a lot of our clients, is when you deploy both together, they start to eliminate some of the gaps that the other has, and really deliver a lot stronger sort of incident management across the board. So if you think of, an AIOps platforms, they become more than just like a monitoring tool. They have things like automated incident resolution capabilities, or integrated collaboration tool sets. It's when you pair those with the sort of chatbots platforms, which serves like a universal interface or your way into this world, it reduces the sort of context switching you have to go through, because that I knew in my daily work when I context switching from doing one thing to another can take a lot of time. So you're trying to break that down, and it sort of also increases the visibility of that work. So turning it from just monitoring to almost, I guess, monitoring plus is a really important part of bringing these two together. The second thing is that it brings real intelligence. So both of the amount of data we're dealing with at the moment generates a lot of noise. And if you haven't got a structured workflow or guidelines on how to deal with all that, the problems become sort of multiplied. So when you integrate these things into these collaborative tools on things like platforms like Datadog or Moogsoft or PagerDuty, they can intelligently identify and alert service owners to problems. They can reduce any unnecessary alerts as well, which is quite an important one. And almost use a shorthand of commands to retrieve relevant information, maybe network diagrams if there's an OK issue, or a run book if you're trying to solve something. And that helps troubleshooting move a lot more quickly. So this application of intelligence to the process is really beneficial and kind of comes out of this AIOps and chatups world. Okay, another thing that AIOps sort of helps is AIOps and chatups together is really the use of almost shortcut or speeding up solutions. So some vendors have been using chatups themselves to kind of drive their journeys, which is quite interesting. But it really becomes beneficial when we do things like software as a service offerings. Splunk's VictorOps originally championed this concept of using chatups to assist with things like cloud security. So these kind of these benefits, or the benefits of putting the two together, really helps you to get to those solutions a lot more quickly. And the last thing is thinking about the integrations across the board. So where we're sort of about chatups being collaborative, that's because the increasing sort of sophisticated APIs allows you to integrate across a number of tools. So chatups providers like Slack can make it easier to incorporate connections directly into workflows. So again, you start to reduce that context, which I talked about earlier, and you've got a much more steady and consistent workflow to work in. And also the rise of kind of things like low-code and no-code connection builders make it easier for not deep techies to start connecting some of these systems up. So those that increased integrations is another piece that is really allowing us to improve the way we do incident management. Okay. So how do I get started? So if we kind of think of this sort of 2x2 maturity matrix, it's kind of can be an easier way to visualize getting started. So in the bottom left quadrant, what we're thinking about there is just a simple implementation of chatups. So if you haven't adopted chatups or even some AIOps enablement tools, start with chatups first. Sure, you've got an adequate chat tool. So as I said, Teams or Slack are perfect because it allows you to do that perpetual messaging. And then make your integrations into your platforms like your IT service management tool or your content management systems, and get used to using that messaging platform and experiment with the styles of what you use and how you interact between the two, and how you then start to build out that collaboration element. Because one mistake people can often make when we think about things like artificial intelligence is that it's purely a technological solution to a problem, whereas actually, again, as Bartley talked about, that communication is still vitally important. So having these collaborative communication tools in place really helps you to then develop the way you use that AI later on. If we look now at sort of that top left quadrant, this is really adding in or adopting that intelligent monitoring with AIOps. So once you've got your chatups capabilities more mature, you can start to really begin to adopt some of these AI principles. So there are things like, sort of full stack AIOps solutions available, or you can just use particular features. And that's often an easy way to start, and then build that into your sort of monitoring platform to really get this started, get this visibility of what's going on. And then once you start the process of integrating your chat platform into your monitoring tools and formalizing your sort of instant response, you can really start to capture some value out of that. And then the next step is really to move beyond simple information retrieval to really, resolving issues in a much more collaborative and automatic manner. We move up onto the sort of top right quadrant. That's really, where your maturity really takes off. So what you're trying to do is you're doing this really integrating, large number of systems to really drive down your mean time to resolution. So once you've got a kind of that really good intelligent monitoring with your AIOps, and if you've leveraged chatups to really build out that collaboration, the next logical step is to absolutely integrate the two into each other. So you're trying to reduce that context switching by having them integrated tightly. If you can tie those workflows up sort of seamlessly, you can start then using your ITSM tool as a system record, consistently, and really bring in those artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities to make suggestions for instant resolution, for example, or solving disruptions a lot more quickly by suggesting how you might approach or fix it. And then if we look down the sort of bottom right quadrant, that's really where we were talking about that increase of collaboration. So if you've got say maturity monitoring tools, but you're still a bit primitive on those collaboration mechanisms, think of old style sort of bridge calls where that's sort of dialed at a particular time. Actually, this chatups allows you to do that much more in real time, and fix things in real time, collaborate in real time. So you want to adopt that to your messaging tool, set up chat rooms for relevant parties or relevant teams to pull together, and then connecting that AIOps platform and monitoring tools to give you the information you need to start collaborating and resolving issues, and really build on that. But one simple way to start is think of kind of simple alerting, get used to kind of centralizing your work around the platform rather than physical locations, and kind of start to expand it from there. But we in terms of our clients, we don't see a huge amount that are yet in that, really invested that top right hand, but there's some that are really starting to get there. So this is really starting to expand and move on quite nicely. So if we think about that as, the maturity of AIOps, what are kind of some of the key use cases that, our clients and people we talk to are talking about? One of the key ones is really with any sort of technology innovation. Again, it goes back to something Bartley talked about earlier, which is about keeping pace with business and delivering value to them. Okay, business is moving faster and faster to meet customer demands, so we have to work just as fast to keep up with that. Now, as I said earlier, as things become more complex, we can't rely purely on manual resources to keep scale with that, keep pace with that increase in scale that we're seeing. You have to think much more in a much more advanced way. So doing things like, replacing low-level repeatable tasks with automation, or using some advanced analytics to understand things better, really help us to start moving forward and keep pace with the business by improving our efficiency and our effectiveness and really delivering solutions that the business wants. Again, another point Bartlett made about experience is an important one, and the increasing customer experience to all businesses is continuing to grow. And, that idea that, the systems running is no longer sufficient for our business partners. What they need is they measure success very differently. They think about that whole stories. It's about how's my customers' experience? Did they enjoy coming to us? Did they get what they wanted? Well, just by merely looking at whether the system's up or down is no longer sufficient in delivering that end-to-end sort of customer experience. So you need to measure those interactions that you have across your technology, and push them out across all your mediums. So guess what? The best way to do that is with this kind of intelligent monitoring, where you look at exactly what's happening right across the customer's journey and are able to spot any problems, or conversely spot where they really are enjoying it and sort of double down on that stuff. Okay, we're also seeing that there's a kind of use of this sort of technology to really reduce the noise that we can get. Again, one of the consequences of that much more complex world we're dealing with is there's a lot more noise, a lot more things to look at. And that volume of data is significantly increasing to individuals and starting to become overwhelming. So, you don't want things like fatigue alert. You don't want to lead to slow incident response and detection because there is just too much to look at. So, adding sort of this context I talked about and highlighting what is important is becoming more and more critical to this sort of world. So that's a use case we're seeing more and more of, reducing that noise to make sure that people can focus on the things they need to. And also having, a kind of solid foundation in sort of value realization is important. So understanding how your various components work together to realize value, as with all technology, is really important. So it relies on your leaders being honest about, how proficient the organization is, each area's capability, and where you might need to improve or otherwise. But having some common terminology and some clear structures around those capabilities can really help improve the team communications and reduce that kind of sort of silo mentality that we've previously seen in organizations. So yeah, those are some of the kind of key use cases we're seeing this stuff being applied to and really delivering on. But if you think now, move on a bit, talk about this reference architecture I mentioned earlier. So this was developed by one of our analysts and customer over this year. And it has those sort of functional tiers that really look at things like capabilities, really, I think the best way of putting it. And then we've got the governance and control tiers, pillars as well to put it all together. So there are, as you would imagine, there are a load of capabilities that need to work together to make AIOps deliver value. So an important step in this is really categorizing the kind of functions capabilities we've got. It gives leaders a starting point to focus on maybe what technology stack they need to evolve, or detect sort of gaps and weaknesses in their organization, and identify maybe resources or vendors that might be able to help meet the needs. And really we've kind of got these 5 tiers of functionality. So at the bottom we've got the sensory data. So this is really about establishing the foundation. So this is the origination of all your data and telemetry that the solution needs to leverage. It can originate from all areas of your organization, in fact should really, and will come in a number of different forms. So this architecture tier is really focused on that telemetry and generation data and making sure you focus on quality and it's complete. It's not doing the processing or the remediation. What it's doing is about creating data that you can then use in the higher tiers. Okay, the next layer is the ingestion layer. So this is kind of sifting out the noise from that kind of raw data that we've built up as a foundation. So aggregating, correlating, duplicating, normalizing, standardizing, all those sorts of terms, but of all this data you've got. So you're prepping it in effect to actually analyze it and understand it. And this, this can be a traditional, kind of ETL process, or might actually move it to something more near real time as you get more sophisticated. But it's about, it's about sifting that noise and turning that raw data into something that you can then start to think about using. The next layer, that processing layer, is really about establishing the context across that data. So this is where you start to apply artificial intelligence and other data sciences approaches to identify things like, patterns or trends or correlations or whatever you might want to look for. But it really provides a data contextualization, so you can act upon the data within a business or user context, rather than just purely maybe an IT context that we might have done before. The fourth layer is this utilization layer, which really transforms that data and insight into actions, proper actions. So this is really that consumption of that process data for a particular purpose. So we use it to determine what actions we should take. So actions could be manual or fully automated. They can be reactive, proactive, predictive. But they are, the things that we need to do that the data has told us. These are the actions we need to take. And the top layer is really about kind of practices, and they're about safeguarding kind of your operational reliability. So they're kind of things you would see before. So your process and procedures across there to sort of analyze and process data from that utilization tier, and really support day-to-day operations by doing that. So it may have slightly different insights, it may look at things differently, but it's really this safeguarding part across the top to make sure that you're consistent doing the right things, making sure that the other layers are still doing the things they're meant to, and maybe suggesting changes or tweaks as you go. But these are these 5 layers of capabilities that our reference architecture really looks at for AIOps. Now we've got these 2 then structural pillars. So they span right across these capabilities tiers, and what you're trying to do there is provide consistency and auditability and kind of things like continuous improvement of your whole landscape. So they're making sure that things like the raw and process data are available to the relevant teams and not just in silos. And they kind of, as they sort of complete this overall architecture, they cover these two ideas. So the first is this government control, which ensures you're working within, I guess, your operational limits, for a better phrase. So it's about verification and audit mechanisms to ensure that you're working in a quality and complete manner right across the life cycle, from bottom to top. It's about thinking about maybe how your expanded use of artificial intelligence is traceable. You hit things like regulatory compliance, because that's important to a lot of organizations. And as we see the increase of AIOps, because it's a partially unknown area, that compliance becomes very important, because you're doing things, you're doing compliance on new things. So it's a really key part of making sure that you work in this, in a controlled and safe manner. On the kind of right-hand side, this kind of retrospective and causal analysis area is really about being proactive. So you are processing data in each of these tiers, but what you want to make sure is that that data is getting across to all your teams. So maybe your application development teams, your security teams, your architecture teams, your IT service management teams and response teams, and all these different areas are using the same data and understand it in the same way, so that they can then use that to make proactive decisions. It's a point Barky made a bit about communication, is it should really be about bi-directional communication across his teams, so that they are able to share insights and knowledge with each other to help improve the overall kind of execution of the process. But yeah, this reference architecture we created this year, and it sort of really allows you to think of some of the things that you need to put in place to really use AIOps effectively. And then lastly, I said I'd talk a little bit about some of the predictions for this year. So this paper was published at the beginning of the year, so I've not had a chance to go back and test any of those yet, but we'll see how they're doing as the year goes on. So what we've started to see is this idea of embedded, or what we call AI inside. So particularly sort of digital native companies have started really embedding AI at the core of everything they do, you know, from their architecture down to their operations. So that it really bridges this kind of business to customer divide. And some of the examples are, we've seen it with a company called Shipt, who do it for delivery, or Frabana, who do it for food. But also we've started to see this idea of AI being embedded in everything they do for more traditional businesses. So, for example, Nestle's Nespresso arm have relaunched themselves as a platform company, doing things like what they call digital baristas. So it's really starting to become a key part of both digital native organizations and non-digital native ones as well. And we really expect the use of this kind of real-time AI to increase by 20% over the year, which is not huge, but is definitely a shape of the trends to come as you start to reduce that, get those insights, get those actions really up and running. One other prediction we made was this idea of doubling in responsible AI. Now, last time you talked a while about, Mark, about ethics and AI becoming more and more important, and a response to that, these responsible AI solutions that offer a range of capabilities, that cover areas such as fairness and transparency in practices. So we currently estimate this market is quite immature. It's only about 75 million globally, but we think that will double as the year goes on, and particularly moving from beyond kind of highly regulated industries where it really did start, where it's it's absolutely critical to be able to be transparent and fair in those regulated industries, to actually more widely adopted, because it allows customers to really sort of start to trust your organization. Okay. Third prediction was really based around kind of use 1 in 7, but we've said, think about 50%. So 50% of non-tech companies will really start to include design and testing talent that they have into AI teams. So this AI adoption grows, so more brands will turn to kind of software engineering, maybe experience type practices, to create AI infused products and applications right across the board, not just in technology solutions. So where we saw a few years ago only the tech elite were investing in this stuff, we're starting to see that's coming right across the board. These non-tech companies will start from the leaders of the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and really point design leadership within these kind of AI projects to help non-technology solutions. Fourth prediction is really the growing kind of advancement of the metaverse, but it will happen slowly. So this idea of this convergence of physical and digital is a fad or trend we've seen, depending on point of view, in tech over the last few years. Firms like Facebook or Roblox have made big bets on it. But we expect that sort of consumer metaverse bubble to slow down as things like regulations in maybe cryptocurrency and gaming increase, or as the importance of the connectivity, the real-time experience becomes more critical, and perhaps slows that down. But that's much more on the community service side. On the enterprise side, we can see, whilst it will only grow slowly, we're really moving on a path towards some useful early deployments on the business side, really helping things like distributed or hybrid workforces connect together. So an expansion on that chatup I was talking about, whereas not just chatting in typically written text or words, but actually being able to use the metaverse to actually connect those teams up across geographies. And then one of the other predictions, but not predictions, actually reality now, is that AI will systems will actually win patents themselves. rather than the traditional idea of a kind of human being creating something that's painted. So whereas we traditionally thought of creativity as being a very human thing, actually this year in South Africa, there was a patent granted to a creative AI system called Davos. Now in the US and the EU, there's still a bit of reticence to do this. There's been no patent applications granted yet. That seems like quite an important step that South Africa recognised, given that AI creative patent, that legal recognition and the protections that it gets as a result. So we think that this year we'll start to see an increase in those patents granted to creative machines rather than human beings themselves.